Welcome back to Game Dev Trenches. This time we're going to talk about game art. For some of us, it doesn't come naturally. For others, it's what we're good at. So let's talk about why it's one of the hardest things that most devs run into. I think there's two camps when it comes to game development, at least for the general purposes. There's coders and there's artists, right? And the coders always have a hard time. Coders always have a hard time with art, and the artists always have a hard time with code. It's very rare someone's good at both of them. Not saying it's not possible, and it's you can't be that person. If you are out there, lucky you. But it's typically it's those two camps, right? So when we're talking about game art, let's focus on the basics and what our possibilities are, what type of game art can we do, right? Let's break it down to a few categories. One is hand-drawn art. You can do hand-drawn art. 2 is pixel art. 3 is modeling, right? 3D models. That's pretty much what everything boils down to. Hand-drawn, pixel, or 3D modeling. Now, yes, there's all kinds of other mediums you can do, but it's typically those. So if we're going to look at them individually, let's break them down. So hand-drawn is anything you do with a pen. It could be digital or it can be on a piece of paper, right? And scan it in. So that's pretty basic. That's pretty straightforward. Photoshop. You can do hand-drawn art, pen, pencil, markers, paintbrushes. Same thing with on physical paper, canvas. Draw it, paint it, sketch it, and scan it in. That's hand-drawn art. Then there's pixel art. There's applications out there like Sprite. I haven't used anything else besides that, but I'm sure there's others. And then there's 3D modeling. Like Blender is a big one for the free crowd, and I can't think of the paid versions right now, but there's Blender. From my own personal experiences, I think hand-drawn art is the easiest to get started with. Anyone can draw anything. It doesn't have to be good. You can just draw something, color it, and throw it into a game, and as long as you keep that style, it should work out. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So there's hand-drawn art. I think that's the simplest. I think pixel art is actually one of the more complicated ones. You could argue it's more complicated than even 3D modeling to some aspect. Now, 3D modeling, yes, is extremely complex, or can be, and you can make super high detail models. But if we're going to keep to the basics to someone just starting out, you can make pretty basic shapes, pretty basic objects, 3D modeling in some easy software out there, and get a general good-looking game by shaders and materials. Pixel art's a little different, though. Pixel art, to make something actually look pretty decent in pixel art, it takes a little finesse. Now, that's my own opinion on it. There's always going to be arguing opinions, and someone's always going to be out there arguing against me, saying how I'm wrong, or how pixel art's super easy and 3D modeling's hard, or hand-drawn's hard or easy, whatever the argument is. Yes, but this is from my own experience. When it comes to, if I had to choose between hand-drawn, pixel, and 3D modeling to get started, I would probably start with hand-drawn art, right? I think anyone can pick up a pencil, whether it's digital or physical, and draw something and put it into their game. I'm not going to go into too much detail about each one because you can look it up. We all have a general idea of what hand-drawn art is, what pixel art is, and what 3D models are, right? We have an idea. So let's talk about why each one is so difficult, or why in general game art is kind of difficult for us coders or us that aren't as inclined to art. Well, it's a whole nother skill on top of learning the rest of game dev, and it's skills that can take years to develop, especially things like 3D modeling. I've tried to use Blender, and it's, there's a pretty steep learning curve there when it comes to it. And I have experience with other 3D modeling software. I have experience in SolidWorks, I have experience in Inventor and other Autodesk AutoCAD programs. But it doesn't translate exactly over to Blender because most of those use some extrusions or extrusion properties, or they're extrusion based, I should say, I guess. And from what I know, Blender's not exactly the same way. It might have that ability, but I didn't come across it in my brief time trying to use it. So let's get back to the game dev aspect of this, right? So there's lots of areas that people fail at when it comes to game dev or struggle. One is tutorials, one is coding, and the other one is art, right? And I think art is one of the trickiest ones actually to get a grasp on or to improve on in a fast enough pace to develop your game on your own if you don't have any art skills. Because coding, you can learn pretty much the basics of coding. You don't have to be an expert to develop a game. And then when it comes to tutorial hell, we've talked about that before. It's kind of a mindset, and you can break out of tutorial hell in an instant, in a day, in a week. But you can't learn art in a day or a week, right? So when it comes to art, it's really tricky, and there's so many aspects of it when it comes to styles, like if you're doing hand-drawn art, for example, like there's a dozen different styles of just what you can draw. Like there's Cuphead, right? There's Hollow Knight. There's trying to think of others. Can't think of off the top of my head. But there's multiple styles, right? And then there's pixel art, which is kind of one style, but there are some variations when it comes to how many pixels you have in the image, in the sprite, which higher pixels means higher definition, but it requires kind of a higher skill to add that detail in the right place and make it look right. And then 3D modeling has a huge learning curve when it comes to how detailed you want it, how low poly you want it, materials, depth. I can't think of anything else right now because I don't have that much experience in it because I'm not that good at it. But there's hardships in all of these areas, right? So, but we need game art, right? We need art in our games. I mean, you can't have a game without some sort of visuals. Maybe you can. I don't think text-based games are that popular anymore, but maybe you can. But if we're trying to add games, or if we're trying to add art in our games, what are our options actually? So we know what there is. We know what art styles there are. There's hand-drawn, there's pixels, and there's Blender. Or there's hand-drawn, there's pixel, and there's 3D modeling. And yes, there's going to be more for all the people out there who are going to say, well, there's this one, or there's this one, or there's this one. Yes, I understand. There's basically an endless amount, but those are the major ones we're going to talk about. Because everything can kind of be boiled down to that. So we have what kind of styles there are. We have why it's difficult because it takes, any one of them takes a major learning curve or has a major learning curve. So how do we add them to our game where we can be successful in game art, right? How do we add it? Well, there's a lot of tips and tricks we can do. So one of them is you can hire someone, whether that's paying them over time, like you're paying their salary or weekly or monthly, or you can do gig work, right? You go on Fiverr and find some artists, give them some details of what you want, and maybe they can create assets for you that way. So you could hire someone. That's option number one. Option number two is you can partner with someone. You can do some revenue share or some equity into your game and say, hey, I need help on this. I'm good with coding. I'm good with the game dev stuff, the technical stuff, but I suck at art. So could you partner with me and make the game assets that I need, whether that's 3D modeling or hand-drawn or pixel or whatever it is? You could partner with someone and not have to pay them anything. Just when you sell your game or come to an agreement, when you sell your game, they get X amount of the revenue from it, right? Maybe that. So then option number three is you learn it yourself. Now this is the hardest one. This one will benefit you probably in the long run the best, but it is definitely the hardest because you have to take time away from coding or from level design or from whatever it is, and you have to design it or learn it yourself. Now, I don't know if I would recommend this depending on what you are doing. I know personally from myself and my own game dev endeavors, in my mind, I thought whether it was hand-drawn or 3D modeling or pixel art, I've tried them all. I thought, well, I can make basic versions of the character and their weapons and maybe some environment elements. But as I dug deeper and deeper and deeper, trying to learn it myself or to create it myself, usually I quickly realized how many different assets I needed or how many different art pieces I needed. Let's take hand-drawn, for example. I was making a game with hand-drawn art, and I drew the character, so then it came time to animate the character. Well, I had some options. You could rig it, right? You could rig the character in Unity and make it move that way, or you can do frames. And the way I drew the character initially and how I wanted it to look, I didn't think rigging would be the best option. So I went with drawing frames. Okay, but then that seemed okay. I needed 7 frames, maybe, say 8 frames. I don't remember what I did. I had a few small frames. Well, then I needed weapons. Okay, well, now the arm also needs to move carrying the weapon for animation, but I want to swap weapons, and I want to aim the weapon. Say it's a shotgun, and I want to be able to control where it aims and fire, and I want different positions for when it's idle. Well, now these are all different drawing. These are all different images I have to draw with animations and put them into the game. And it was drastically getting up to like 90 plus maybe different images for one character. And then I was going to need other characters for enemies. And that wasn't including other assets in the game either. And hand drawing things just took, or was going to take way too long. And that was something I learned, and I learned by doing it, trying to build it out myself. So my point is that if you decide to build it out yourself, that's a great skill to do. I'm not saying don't do that, and I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but just be aware it adds up really quickly when it comes to designing and building everything yourself, if you're also doing everything else. Because as I was doing, or when I was doing art, I couldn't do really anything else because I was focused on getting that working. So we talked about a few areas of how you can do it. Hire someone, partner with someone, make it yourself, right? There's also other tricks you can do in-game while developing that don't require actually that much art skill to improve or make your game look good with art. So the first one is color theory. One of the easiest things and really one of the most important parts of adding art to your game is color theory. It really brings everything together. And I'm no expert at it, but I have watched dozens upon dozens of videos on YouTube trying to figure out and understand color theory. And I'm not going to teach it here because, like I said, I'm no expert on it. But I have seen and try to use and implement different color palettes using Adobe Color Wheel, which I recommend using. I have seen in a major improvement on my art in-game, whether it's 3D or 2D, regardless, color theory is extremely important. And like I said before, I like to use Adobe Color Wheel. There's a section in there that they come with pre-made palettes, and then or you can give it pictures and it'll give you the color scheme on those, or you can give it a color and it gives you whatever color theory you want for it, right? Any ugly game or any bad game can be drastically improved with color theory. You can take, you see it all the time. You can go look it up right now. There's videos out there where they take an ugly scene with very poorly designed scene, and they use color theory on it, and it looks drastically better, like night and day. There's a reason to that. I mean, I don't know the science, but there is a science behind it of why it's pleasing to our eye when it's properly used. Color theory. So that's another thing. You can use color theory. I've said it like 50 times now. You can use color theory to improve your game. That's probably one of the first things you should do. The next thing I want to bring up is making everything fit together, right? So we have color theory. That's an option you can do. The next thing you do is, and some of this is kind of drifting into level design, game design, but it kind of fits in with art because you can cut corners, you can take shortcuts if you implement some of these things I'm going to bring up. Is even if you're poor, even if you're a bad artist, say you want to go with hand drawn. If it was me and I want to make something cohesive right now, I would maybe do hand drawn art, right? I would do maybe 2D hand drawn art. Not my favorite thing to do, but let's play a scenario that that's what I want to do. What I would do with hand drawn art, I would, even if I was a terrible artist right now, couldn't draw anything, I could draw basic versions of everything I wanted in game. And I could draw it all in the same style. Every single asset in the same style. Whether that's characters, enemies, weapons, environment, everything in the same style. And it will look 1,000 times better than if I drew something in a different style and then drew something and gave it some color and this one didn't color and just did random things, right? Make sure your style is cohesive. Make sure your style goes together with everything else around it. And that brings me to my next point is assets and asset flipping. It's a huge topic, right? It's very debatable. You got people who say it doesn't matter. People who say they'll never use assets because they're not sure if it's even legal to use them, or it's just asset flipping and you're not even a real developer if you do asset flipping, right? Well, there's actually a middle ground there. I think you should not do asset flipping when it comes to just taking assets, even if you pay for them, taking assets and throwing them in a game and slapping a few lines of code on and saying, I made a game. Usually they don't end up very well anyway, so they're kind of bites them in the ass in the long run. People who just asset flip games like that, it kind of doesn't work out anyways. So I wouldn't worry too much about that because you're not going to do it anyways, but you can do it if you do it right. I know I kind of sound like you just said don't do it, but now you're saying do it. Well, you can do it. Just do it right. There's a way to asset flip where you're not actually asset flipping. You're altering the assets to fit your own game, and then it's fine. And I'm sure I'll get arguing. I'm sure I'll get some kickback on that, but it's true. It's perfectly fine. Trust me. If you think about it, it's fine. And I'll explain why. So say I buy a bunch of assets on the store, say Unity Asset Store, because that's what I use is Unity. As long as I make sure the assets are pretty much the same style, and then I take all those assets and I apply shaders to them and change the materials. Maybe I take the materials and throw them into Photoshop and change them, whether it's changing the colors or adding details, the saturation, the hue, or I throw it into a toon shader and really play around with that, and they look completely different. That's okay. That's perfectly fine to do, and I would recommend actually doing that. If you're really bad at art and you don't want to pay someone and you don't know anyone who can draw art for you and you don't want to make anything yourself, use assets. It's perfectly fine whether you're learning, especially if you're learning, use assets. There's nothing wrong with it. Even if you want to ship a game, use assets. As long as you have the legal right to use them, if you bought them on a store or something and you know you can use them, use them. But use them wisely, right? There's no difference in, this is turning into an asset flip rant, but this is part of game art. There's no difference in hiring someone to make you assets or buying pre-made assets on the asset store. There's really no difference. Someone else besides you is making an asset and you are paying them to use it. Bottom line, they put that asset on the store for you to use. So what I mean by perfect example, which I think they created everything on their own. But for the game Thronefall, it's a really good game, really popular game, by some really good indie devs, right? I'm pretty sure they probably made all the assets themselves, but they are the type of assets you could buy on the asset store. And all they did was throw some toon shaders on them and made them look all uniform, made them look all the same, all like they belong to the same world. And it looks great. That game looks amazing. It's super basic assets, super basic toon shading, but it still looks great. So you could do the same thing. Go to the asset store, buy some assets that go together, actually go together, alter them, change them to fit your game, truly alter them, and you can use them, and it's fine. This will probably catch a lot of flack because I know it's a huge topic and a huge debatable topic. But I truly don't see anything wrong with using assets as long as you are changing them up for your game. If you're just taking them straight from the store, then yeah, if you're taking them from the store and just throwing them into a game and saying you made a game and you didn't really do anything, then yeah, you're not doing much and you are just asset flipping. But if you're actually putting effort into redesigning them, altering how they look, and making them look uniform to your world, then it's perfectly fine. Go for it. Do it. Let's wrap up and go over what we learned here today, or what my experience is at least for game art is. I know it seems like kind of brushed over, but without going into technical details on teaching you, there's not really a whole lot we can talk about with game art besides some mindsets, some what it is, and how to get past it, right? So if we break game art down into categories, the different styles at least, what do we have? We have hand-drawn, we have pixel, and we have 3D. And why is it only those three? Because that's pretty much what it is. In 2D games, you have hand-drawn art or you have pixel art. There's not much more than that. And like I said, there's other options out there, yes, but it's pretty much those. And then 3D games, everything's just 3D modeled. Everything, right? 3D model. Yes, you can have some 2D assets in 3D games, but that's a little different. But it's still just hand-drawn or pixel in a 3D world. But so you have 3D, whether it's low poly or high definition, doesn't matter. It's still a 3D model. So you have hand-drawn, pixel, 3D model. Okay, we have our assets, our different styles. What are our options for us if we are trying to do game art, right? We can hire someone or gig that work out to do it for us and return the assets to us. We can partner with someone. We can say, hey, work with me on this and I'll give you X amount for it of equity or revenue share or something in the game. I'm not going to pay you any cash. Whatever we sell, you get X amount from it, right? Partner with someone. Or you can learn it on your own. Now, like I said, learning on your own is probably going to be the hardest, but definitely going to be the hardest. And it's going to take the longest. But there are shortcuts. And the shortcuts are what? Color theory, right? You use color theory to your advantage. Make the world cohesive. Make everything in the world seem like it fits together. Seem like it belongs there. It's all the same art styles, all the same color schemes. Like if you had a black and white game for the majority of the game, and then you went to a spot and randomly it was just super colorful, unless that was like part of the game where something happened, it would look really out of place, right? Or if you were doing hand-drawn art and then you had some 3D pixel art in there too, it's probably going to look out of place. So make it cohesive, right? So so that leads us into what the last thing is assets, right? In assets, you can use color theory. You can change assets using color theory. You can make them look all cohesive, and you can use them in your game. You can edit them and use them and sell the game. Sell the game with these assets. So there's one more thing that we can talk about when it comes to art, and right now it's a more debated topic than assets and asset flipping, and that's AI art, right? I don't really care about AI art that much. I like AI in game dev when it comes to coding and everything. I think it's there to stay. I think it belongs. I think it's only going to improve and it's only going to help us. But I know when it comes to AI art, it's very tempting to give AI prompts and have it generate things. and use it in game. And I don't know, I haven't seen too many games using it that actually like publish and use it. I'm sure there's plenty out there, and they're probably not the best. I think AI art has its place when it comes to concepts, ideas. You can give AI prompts to you can give AI prompts and then tweak those prompts, or maybe draw over them, sketch over it and draw your own thing, create your own art. Like say you needed a sword and you told AI to make it, but it wasn't exactly right, or you could tell it was AI. Well, throw it in the Photoshop and trace around it, add some colors to it, and then you have your own sword, right? That's fine. There's no difference in that than taking an image off the internet and manipulating it, changing it into something your own. There's no difference in learning how to art or learning how to do art, right? It's how we all learn art. I know, without getting too much into a AI art debate or rant, I think the argument, which I'll probably get a lot of flack from this, from anti-AI art people. Like I said, though, I'm not pro-AI art. I'm just somewhere in the middle where I don't really care. But I think the argument that AI art steals art is actually a weak argument. And hear me out. I could be completely wrong in this, but this is my theory. This is my thought process. Is when you learn art by hand for yourself, whatever it is, if it's drawing, painting, coloring, I don't care what it is, sculpting, you have to take someone else's art, copy it, and make your own version of it, right? Whether that's looking at an art book, looking at nature, looking at a sculpture, looking at a painting on the wall, looking at something in your room, you are taking something else that already exists and you are turning it into art by drawing it yourself, or you are drawing it yourself or recreating it in your own style. Is that not what AI is doing? Is it not taking art that exists and recreating it in its own style? I mean, that's how I look at it. When I was a kid and I want to draw something, like I used to really like drawing Dragon Ball Z, I would look at Dragon Ball Z pictures to draw them. I wouldn't try to draw them out of my memory, out of my thoughts. I would reference a picture. That is completely normal. And that's what AI is doing. It is referencing images on the internet. I don't know if I want to talk about all this because this is going to turn into a big old debate. I don't know if I really want that. So like I said, you can use AI art for concepts, stuff like that. I mean, you can use it whatever you want. I don't really care what you do with it. That's up to you. But if it was up to me, I would use it for concepts and stuff. Give it some prompts, have it generate them some things, some ideas, some world environment, some characters, but turn it into something of your own by yourself, or have someone else turn it into something using that concept. That's perfectly fine. So that's another option. So if we're going to continue the recap, so we have the assets or asset flipping, and we also, the last thing is AI art, right? We talked about that a little bit. You can use it. It's perfectly fine if you use it right. I mean, I'm not telling you, like I said before, I'm not telling you what you can and can't do. I would recommend using it for concepts, though, and not really much more than that. Usually the cohesiveness is not really there, and that's a big part of it when it comes to AI art. When it comes to game dev, you need that cohesive look. You need that environment, that world, that universe to look like it all belongs. And it's really hard to do that with AI art. You can always kind of tell, like, well, something's off. The design's slightly different. So yeah, that's the recap. If you're enjoying the podcast, you can watch it on YouTube, or you can listen to it on Spotify, Apple, or Amazon Music. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time.